they'll come over and handle that stuff. So the officer that's here, just right around the corner, usually they'll call us. We're more specialized in this type of stuff. So.
And I brought in Chief Bray as well. He's been working with me for months now, running active shooter response for our law enforcement officers. So he was kind enough to come in today and kind of talk to us and do some questions and answers with you guys as well. So, Chief, you want to do a brief introduction?
Dave Bray, Goldberg Fire, Deputy Chief there. Up here for about 3 years. Got the bulk of my career down in Las Vegas, and as Officer Gilbert was stating, that we work together on the active shooter response for the county.
So as I said, I've been with the department for about 18 years. I've had a chance to do a lot of really cool stuff with the department. The last handful of years I've been doing a lot of teaching when it comes to weapons and tactics, but also classroom type stuff. I've been leading our area's active shooter response training program for our officers, and with Chief's assistance here, we just wrapped up a training program where we trained, I think the final count was 105 local law enforcement officers in the law enforcement response to an active shooter, active attacker type incident here in our community. So we'll roll into kind of what that's going to look like for you guys on the civilian side. I did want to kind of start with, we're not going to come in here today and tell you guys, hey, this is what you should do or this is how you should react. We're not here to teach you guys tactics or anything. We're here to give you more of a perspective on some things to consider if heaven forbid, an emergency like that was to happen here in this building or in an environment where you are. We want you to kind of start that conversation, start you thinking in that direction so that if an emergency actually occurs, you kind of already started thinking about that and you can come up with a plan of action on your part. But we're not going to come in and tell you, hey, you should always do this or you should never do this, because there's too many variables in a real world emergency for us to kind of dictate those terms for you. If at any point you guys have any questions, please by all means throw your hand up. I kind of run my training as kind of an open forum, so throw your hand up. Let's have a discussion if you have any questions or need clarification on anything that we're talking about here. Let me see if my button is working. There we go. All right, so our learning objectives today. So I want to make sure everyone understands active attacker, active shooter, what we're talking about when we use those terms. Understand measures that can be employed to increase your chance of survival and reduce the effectiveness of an active threat. Understand law enforcement's response and how to react to law enforcement, and understand how you can prepare and train as employees in the building here. We're going to talk a little bit about some historical active shooter incidents that have occurred. I'm generally not a fan of trigger warnings, but let's be honest, this is a very disturbing conversation. None of us enjoy having this conversation. It's a very necessary conversation. So some of the topics we're going to be discussing, they are rather disturbing, so just be aware. So, first of all, who is the active attacker? What do they look like? What's their motivation? What's their target? What weapons do they use? It's very easy to kind of get sucked into what is the stereotype of what we think that attacker is going to look like. But as you'll see from some of the discussions we'll have, there really isn't a profile on what that attacker is always going to look like. It could really be anybody. They could really use any kind of weapon. They could be motivated by almost anything. What's their motivation? It could be terrorism. They could be just members of the public. They could be a bully. They could be loners, mental health issues. There's all kinds of reasons for attackers to do their attack. There may be no rational reason whatsoever for them to pick that specific building or target those specific people. And the location, obviously, the most high-profile active shooter incidents are going to be schools, right? We're very vulnerable when it comes to our children in the schools, but it could be any location. It could be the mall across the street, it could be an office building, it could be the post office, it could be a school, or any other building. And weapons, of course, firearms are going to be very common as well, but it's not only limited to weapons. Vehicles have been used, firearms, knives, there's all kinds of, anything that could be used as a weapon could be used in one of these active attacker type incidents. For that reason, on the law enforcement and first responder side, we often will refer to these less as active shooter and more as an active attacker incident, just because it's not necessarily going to be a firearm involved in these incidents. All right, here's some stats. This is a little bit dated. This is from 2021. So in 2021, we had 61 shooters carried out the 61 active shootings. 60 of them acted alone, so you can see, generally speaking, it's going to be a lone attacker in these cases. Youngest was 12 years old, oldest was 67 years old. 60 were male, 1 was female. 2 wore body armor out of the 61 shooters. 1 had explosives. 30 of them were apprehended by law enforcement. 14 were killed by law enforcement. 4 were killed by citizens. 11 committed suicide. 4 of the shooters were employees. 4 were former employees, and 2 were current students. 66% of all active shooter incidents ended before the police arrived. So, yeah.
Are those stats for the nation or the state?
This is nationwide. Yeah, these are from the FBI.
Also, and also remember, for it to qualify as an active shooter for the FBI, there has to be 4 victims. Shooter can be one of them, but it has to be 4. So if there's only 3 or 2 or 1, it's not in these stats.
Correct. 66% of all active shooter incidents ended before the police arrived. So that tells us that they're generally very quickly unfolding, and they generally end very quickly. 69% ended within 5 minutes or less. 36 ended in 2 minutes or less. So they generally happen very quickly, and they're over also very quickly. So what's an active shooter? Different federal and state agencies define it differently. I think the federal definition is the best, and this is the federal definition here: an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined or populated area. That's generally what we're going to refer to as an active shooter incident. Okay, so we're going to go over a couple of case studies, discuss some active attacker, active shooter incidences that have occurred over the years. By no means are these cases the most current ones. This is just, I selected these ones as a variety of different incidences that have happened to kind of show different elements that the attacker chose to put into play in these different attacks that they committed. So we'll start off almost 100 years ago, 1927 in Bath, Michigan. This attack still stands as the deadliest school attack in U.S. history. No firearms were involved in this attack. It was entirely explosives. In this case, the attacker was an employee of the school district. He was also a farmer, kind of a disgruntled old man. He was running at the same time as a part-time electrician for the school district. He was running for an elected position with the county. He failed in the election, wasn't elected. The county was imposing around the same time a tax to help fund the school district. And his farm was getting foreclosed on, so kind of all this came together, and he in his mind decided that the school district was the root of all evil and had to pay for everything that was going wrong in his life. So over the span of a year or so, he started planning his attack on the school, collecting explosives. He used his part-time job as an employee of the school to go to the school on the weekends and plant explosives in the walls and in the ceilings of the school. On the day of the attack, the explosives were on a timer. They were set to go off during the school hour. He had 2 sets of explosives. One was set to go off during the school hour, and the second one was set to go off about an hour later, intending to target the first responders. The first set of explosives detonated. It damaged the second set of explosives, so thankfully those didn't go off. After the first set of explosives, he then drove to the scene with his vehicle rigged as a car bomb, and detonated that, killing himself and then more victims and bystanders at the scene. The Austin clock tower. In this case, the attacker there's nothing special about him, just kind of a middle-class kid in Texas. He joined the military, the Marine Corps, the Officer Candidate Program, ended up failing out of that, finished his military career as an enlisted Marine, got out of the military, went to, I believe it was University of Texas, got his degree, was kind of working a nondescript middle-class job. For some reason, he had a fascination with this clock tower. He was known to comment, in the investigation, they found that he had commented years before that someone with a rifle could hold off an army from the top of the clock tower, which is basically what he did in his attack. The day before his attack, he had some friends over to his house. His friends commented that was the happiest they'd ever seen him. That night, he killed his wife and his mother. The next day, he went to the clock tower dressed up as a workman with a toolbox, which contained all his weapons. Went to the top of the clock tower, barricaded the door, and from the observation deck, randomly sniped people in the plaza until law enforcement was able to breach the door and end up killing him. Columbine, I'm sure we've all heard of Columbine. This was a major incident as far as law enforcement tactics are concerned. prior to Columbine, law enforcement would generally respond to major incidents such as a bank robbery or hostage situations or a shooting. And your patrol guys would get on scene and they would recognize that the scenario or the scene was beyond their capabilities, so they would hold what we call the perimeter, so that law enforcement would stand there on the perimeter of the scene, and they would call in the specialized units such as SWAT to come in and handle with the special circumstance, and SWAT would have the higher degree of training and the better equipment to deal with it. Generally, that's a good tactic if I have a barricaded suspect or if I have hostages in the building. That's a good way to handle that. But when your attacker's intent is to kill as many people as possible, all you're doing in that situation is to give them as much time as they could possibly want to do exactly what their objective is. So for law enforcement, this opened up the law enforcement in general, our eyes to realize that our tactics have to change. We have to change active shooter incidents different. So this is where our present day active shooter response for law enforcement are where our tactics came from. In this situation, these two kids that planned their attack, they created 99 explosive devices. Thankfully, they were not very good bomb makers, and most of those explosive devices did nothing. They set up a car bomb in the parking lot because they knew in an emergency, all of the students and staff would evacuate to the parking lot, and that car bomb was intended to target them in the parking lot. They created another explosive device that was set to detonate hours before their initial attack, and that was set across town. The purpose of that was to draw law enforcement and fire away from the school to, again, give them more time at the school itself. On the day of the attack, they had explosive devices in the cafeteria set to go off at lunchtime when there would be the most people in the cafeteria. Those bombs did not go off, so they improvised and simply just started shooting. Ultimately, a school resource officer engaged the suspect. The school resource officer was injured. SWAT arrived. There's a running gun battle back and forth between law enforcement. And then after about 45 minutes or so, both of the suspects ended up killing themselves. Virginia Tech, in this case, the shooter had just handguns. This case is unique because there was pre-planning for this attack. He was in the investigation. They determined that several days prior to the attack, the shooter was seen to have gone to the target building with a padlock and chain, and he padlocked the main doors closed, and they determined that he was rehearsing the attack in preparation for his actual attack. On the day of the attack, he committed a double murder elsewhere on campus, again, with the intent of drawing law enforcement and fire away from the scene. He then went to the main doors, chained them closed, and then proceeded his attack inside the building. Law enforcement got there actually rather quickly. They were able to just simply shoot the padlock off, so they gained access to the building also very quickly. And then as law enforcement approached where he was, he committed suicide.
Something to add to this, one of kind of the takeaways from this one, especially for you guys, was the way that he did his planning. So when he chained the doors shut, he chained them shut to see how long it would take either security or somebody who worked in the building to notice that the door was chained shut. Nobody did. He took it off. So it's little things that are just out of the ordinary that he capitalized on and was able to do some major damage with it. And then there was other things that were big red flags that as these things happen, we learn because we don't know everything. And but that was kind of a takeaway from it. Where if you see something that isn't quite right, say something. It's it's not wrong. So.
The Isla Vista killings, this one is unique for us as law enforcement because this didn't have a specific location. In this case, this attacker was extremely narcissistic. To the point where the conclusion he came to was that because he couldn't get a girlfriend, it was because women in general were evil. It was nothing wrong with him. So he started planning an attack on women in general and on couples as well. On the day that he instigated his attack, he waited in his apartment for his roommates to get home. He had 3 of them, killed each of them as they got home. After he'd done that, he went to Starbucks, got his drink, uploaded his manifesto, and then went to the college, to a sorority with an intent to target all the women there. They were smart enough to not let him inside the building. So he improvised and simply started driving around town running over bicyclists, and then shooting out of the vehicle, targeting random people. Ultimately, law enforcement was able to ram and shoot and injure him, at which point he committed suicide. This one was a legitimate terrorist attack. This one was unique for a couple reasons. First of all, it was a husband and wife team, so there were two attackers in this case. The husband, I believe, was born in the United States, and I think the wife was from Pakistan, not sure on that one. In any case, the husband worked for the county of San Bernardino in the health department, and at some point they became radicalized and decided they were going to commit an ISIS-style terrorist attack in the United States. They decided that they were going to target their Christmas party, his workplace Christmas party. On the day of the Christmas party, the husband showed up in the morning per usual. He came into the room where everyone was having the Christmas party, put a backpack on the table. Everything else was normal. Right around lunchtime, he goes out to the parking lot where his car was, and his wife was waiting in the car. They changed into black outfits, got their weapons, came back into the workplace party, and opened fire. The attack was very brief. It was about 5 minutes long, and then they left the scene. Because they attacked where he worked, his coworkers recognized his voice, so they immediately knew who he was. The bag he put on the table was a bomb. It's timed to go off later, intending again to target first responders and then survivors of the attack. Thankfully, it didn't go off. Because law enforcement quickly knew who he was, they were able to get that information out to patrol, who found him, which turned into a kind of a running gun battle, and ultimately they were cornered and killed in a shootout with law enforcement. Bottom line is it's really easy, especially in a beautiful county like Sonoma County, is that it's easy to get in the mentality that, hey, that could never happen here. That's a big city problem, but Sonoma County is beautiful. We don't have that kind of crime here. Reality is it could happen anywhere. In our training with our guys, we go over Uvalde a little bit, and Uvalde is a tiny little town of I think about 16,000 people out in the middle of nowhere, Texas. If there was ever a town of it'll never happen here, it'd be Uvalde, and it did. So instead of getting complacent and thinking that, hey, it'll never happen here, this isn't something I need to think or worry about, we should be thinking that it could happen here. I shouldn't be going around paranoid that it will happen here, but I should be thinking that it's a possibility. I should keep that possibility in my mind and just be aware of that and look for signs and indicators. And if I do see something strange, like Bill was saying, I should say something. Buttons are working here. Hold on. Okay, so lessons learned from past active shooter, active attacker incidences. Generally, the attacker selects soft targets that provide the highest impact to society with the least risk to attackers. This is why they like schools, as they know they want to inflict mass damage as quickly as possible. So they're going to go to places where they can do exactly that. So high density places like malls, workplaces, and schools, where they know that they can get in there relatively easy and in a short amount of time cause the mass amount of damage as possible. There's no predictability to the who or to the why or to the how. Let's be honest, there's no foolproof way that we can prevent this. There's no way to eliminate a threat from a determined attacker. So I'm a combat veteran, served in Afghanistan. So in the military, we have many, many layers of defense, from weapon systems to barriers to all kinds of different systems. And one thing in the military that we're taught is when we're setting up our defensive perimeter, we're not there to stop the enemy, because there is no way that you can stop the enemy. We're there to slow and delay them. And that's what we're doing in the military when we're setting up our defense. Same is true here. There's no way that we can, if someone is determined to get into this building or do an attack in a location, they're going to be able to do it. We're not going to be able to prevent that. The best plan is only as good as the weakest link. And then bottom line, evil exists. All right, active shooter situation. So when an incident such as this occurs, it's going to be dynamic. It's going to be very rapid. It's going to be extremely unpredictable. It's going to be extremely chaotic and confusing. Critical information is usually going to be lost in the overwhelming amount of false information. So if you can imagine, if there were shots fired in this building, you're probably going to have about 90 people calling 911, and they're going to be all telling dispatch what they heard and what they knew. And a lot of what they tell dispatch may or may not be correct. They might see an off-duty cop running down the street with a rifle, and they're going to say, hey, he's a white male with a black jacket. And so law enforcement is going to be looking for what ended up being, say, a detective who was running to the scene. So it's very difficult for first responders coming to the scene to filter through all that chatter to try to find the correct information. So what that just means is it's going to be very chaotic and confusing in the moment that this is happening. Generally, active shooter incidents are going to be over within 5 to 15 minutes. And when I say over, I mean the actual active killing. The scene is going to be very active for a long time, especially if there's going to be victims. Emergency services, so 911, police, fire, medical, are almost immediately going to be overwhelmed. False alarms slow down the response and reaction. In fact, Chief, you want to talk about Las Vegas real quick? Kind of when all the other casinos when you were there?
Oh, yeah. So the Las Vegas in 2017, October 1st, had a large country concert on Route 91 going on. Rather unique situation in the sense of this was this guy's second attempt 2 weeks prior. He tried to do the same thing or did a dry run at another concert venue down there. Long story short, shooting from high elevation across massive parking lot, massive Las Vegas Boulevard, might as well be an 8-lane highway into the concert grounds. Everybody that was there that could fled. And so there were reports of 6 active shooters at 6 separate casino properties as people fled. So as they ran, they went to New York, we got an active shooter, resources are going to there. So anyhow, it can get very chaotic and very confusing. And you know, to Joe's point, we're trying our best to kind of understand what's going on. And then mind you, as we're coming to the scene, we're getting met with people that are fleeing the scene. Are they injured or are they not? And so it's very chaotic, for sure. I don't want to go too much further than that.
That hit exactly what I was looking for. Historically speaking, the shooter often commits suicide when confronted by law enforcement. Welcome, come on in. And then the biggest issue for you guys, or excuse me, victims that may be trapped in the scene is professional medical care generally can't enter into an active crime scene. So if there's an active shooter in the building and we have injured parties that are down, your medics off the rigs can't come into that building, which leaves us potentially a significant time lag until we can get professional medical care with those victims. All right, so what should you do? First of all, you should have a plan. You should know your facility, know your access and exit routes, know the blind spots, know locations of first aid supplies, know secure locations within the facilities. So what I mean by secure locations is know a room that you can go where you're going to be out of sight, that you can lock that door, where it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for someone to break into where you are. So like, let's say this room here, I wouldn't necessarily call this a secure room because I believe we have large glass windows behind the curtain there. So it'd be relatively easy for those windows to be broken and someone could get in here. But maybe there's a smaller room in the back that doesn't have windows and it's a hardened or more reinforced commercial door that's lockable from the inside. That would be a more secure location. What you're looking for is a location where you can go that makes it too difficult for that attacker to get in that room to make it worth his time, and he just moves on. So that's your objective, trying to find that secure location. Harden your facility. Have a means to lock or secure doors, security film on windows. This would be especially true for like a school, a single floor school with ground level windows. If I have a security film on it, it might make it a lot more difficult to smash out that window to get access. At Sandy Hook, the shooter, they had security locking doors, but he simply broke through the window and walked right through, so it didn't do any good. So if you had reinforced glass or that security film to make that difficult, that's going to help. It doesn't apply here because obviously no one's flying up through the force of the store window. Ensure perimeter fences are secure if that's relevant. Stay alert. Know who should be on the property. Don't get complacent. If you see something, say something. Have a standardized basic plan. So like I mentioned, you should not have the mentality of it'll never happen here, so I don't need to think about it. You should have a thought of, well, if it's unlikely, but if it was to happen here, what's my reaction going to be? So if I'm in my office and I hear gunshots in the lobby, what am I going to do? And if you have that thought in your head and you think about that now, when that happens, heaven forbid, you're going to have somewhere to start your reaction, and that you're already going to be ahead of many people, unfortunately. Ensure staff understand their roles and their actions. All right, so what's happening? What should we do? We've all heard this before, run, hide, fight. So we're going to go through this and break it down a little bit. Run. First of all, evacuate if possible. If there's a considerable distance between you and the gunfire or the person, quickly move away from the sound of gunfire. If the gunfire or armed person is in your building and it is safe to do so, run out of the building and move as far away until you are at a secure place to hide. Leave your belongings, keep your hands visible to law enforcement, take others with you, but do not stay behind because others will not go. Call 911 when it is safe to do so. Do not assume that someone else has reported the incident. The information that you are able to provide to law enforcement may be critical, such as the number of shooters, descriptions, identification, number, and types of weapons, and location of the shooter. So if there's an emergency or you hear shots and you can, get away, get as far away as possible, just drop everything and run. That's you're going to be your first choice if you can safely get away.
Hey Joe, I just want to add
Sure.
to that too. Often when these scenes develop, we're not inclined to think gunshots, right? We hear pallet jacks, we hear somebody knocked over a case of something, right? It makes noises and you're going, oh, did somebody just trip and fall? And so there's usually that lag. But as it starts to become readily apparent that there's something that's not right, don't sit and think like, am I safe? Go. Just, you know what I mean? After that, you go, oh, they made funny because you ran because somebody dropped a water bubbler. No big deal. We'll go back, right? But recognize that there is that lag. Make sure that's your first step, is to get out as quickly as you can.
And we've seen this in, for example, a plane crash where the plane is on fire, where people will stop to get their carry-on before they get off the plane. And we laugh about that, but that's kind of the natural human reaction. In this case, when it's time to go, you are leaving everything and you're running. Forget your laptop, forget your wallet, just leave right now. All of that stuff, none of that stuff is worth your life. So get out right now, get as far away as possible is what you should be doing. All right, hide silently in as safe a place as possible. If the shooter is in close proximity and you cannot evacuate safely, hide in an area out of the armed person's view. Choose a hiding place with thicker walls and fewer windows if possible. Lock doors and barricade with any items that will slow or stop the attacker. Turn off the lights, silence phone, and turn off the electronics. Close windows, shades, and blinds. Avoid being seen from the outside of the room if possible. If you are outdoors and cannot run safely, find a place to hide that will provide protection from gunfire, such as brick walls, large trees, or buildings. Remain in a place until you receive all clear or are contacted by law enforcement. This is what I talked about having that hardened room. So if this is your office and you work here, know what rooms that you in this building that you can quickly get to, that you can lock and secure from the inside. Yeah.
Or let's say we're barricading and hiding, and the shooter were to say something trying to pretend they're law enforcement. Is there any sort of like words that our local CHP would say that we would know, like, oh, this is ours?
There is not, but I, as an officer coming in, I would fully expect you to be highly suspicious of me coming in. And if you don't want to open that door because you don't think I'm a cop, I'm good for you. I'm totally in support of that. So my concern as an officer coming in is I want to find the bad guy and stop him. And if you're talking to me and I'm in that room, I know the bad guy's not in there. You're the least of my problems and you're safe in that room, so I'm going to keep on going. There's outside the box ways that I can give you peace of mind that I'm a cop. I might turn up my radio so you can hear the radio traffic, or I might have you call 911 and then have my dispatch tell you, yep, that's an officer outside your room. There's different ways we can handle this, but if somebody goes, hey, I'm a cop, open the door, and you're not 100% sure, don't open that door. Kind of touch on this real quick. So I know there's a lot of glass in this building here. Glass doesn't stop bullets. And your bad guy, what he's going to be doing is he's going to be looking for as many victims as possible. So looking at historical incidents that have happened, they just roam around looking for something they can see and then they'll shoot them. Glass doesn't stop bullets. So find that hardened room somewhere out of sight. Worst case, if you're in a room that has windows kind of like this, do this. Close the blinds, lock that door. At the very least, the shooter can't see you. There might be glass there, but they can't see you. So you do everything you can to get out of sight. In this room itself, that back corner would be even better than hanging out here, right? Maybe tuck around in the back behind that office wall, get out of sight, hunker down, silence your phones. You want him to think that there's nobody in here and that it's too much work for him to break into that room to verify that there's no one in that room, so he just moves on and goes somewhere else. He knows as soon as he comes in that building, the clock is ticking and that we're coming at 100 miles an hour to the scene. So he doesn't want to spend 5 minutes breaking into a room that might be empty. He wants to go find victims. So make it hard to get in there and be quiet so he thinks there's no victims. That's your objective. Yeah.
Okay. The majority of glass is wired glass.
Perfect. Okay.
So if they can smash it, it's going to take an effort to get it.
Good. Yeah, that's excellent. A lot of buildings just have regular safety glass there, which is super easy to break through. So if that wire mesh glass, that's going to be a lot more difficult for them to break through. So that's excellent. Won't stop a bullet, but it will definitely prevent breaking through.
But physically, it's somewhat something unfair.
Good.
Also understand that we use the terms cover and concealment. So concealment means that you're just out of sight. It doesn't mean that it's actually going to stop anything. So a sheetrock wall inside of the house, the glass, even these walls here. If, you know, Officer Gilbert's on the other side and he decides to shoot through, that the bullet's gonna come through. Cover would be, it's a concrete wall. It's something that, you know, there's a whole bunch of books, there's a lot of paper in a filing cabinet. Something that will either stop or even, you know, slow a bullet or a round before it can do any, you know, major damage. So, you know, try and find something that actually has cover. If you can't, then definitely go for concealment. Something like this, maybe get down behind one of the parts of the table here and just make yourself as small as possible and silence everything.
So there's a lot of different ways that you can, your job is to make it as difficult as possible for him to access you and everyone with you, to the point where he's like, that's not worth the effort, I'm gonna go find somebody else that's easier. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. If you're in this room here, okay, so we have 2 access points, these 2 doors here, and if we're all trying to prevent someone from getting in, we can take these tables, we can stack them up there, we can jam something under the door. There's a lot of outside the box things that we can do to make it hard to get through that door. That's your objective there. Just make it so difficult that it's not worth the effort, and he moves on and leaves you alone. That's what we're trying to do to make that room as hard as possible. Here's a couple of different examples of just on-the-fly things you can do. This tool is actually, it's like 25 bucks from Home Depot. It's not that expensive. You can get them on Amazon, and that's great. It just fits underneath the doorknob, jams into the carpet here, and even us that have breached a lot of doors, I would have a really hard time getting that door open with even proper breaching tools. Dave could, they're professionals at this, but on the law side, we'd have a hard time getting that door open if you had that there. So that might be just some peace of mind you can keep in your cubicle, and you could get your door secured and no one's coming through that door with that on. All right, last worst case situation, fight. Take the action to disrupt or incapacitate the shooter. If your life or someone else's life is in immediate danger, disrupt the attacker and incapacitate the suspect by any means possible. Utilize improvised weapons. Be aggressive and committed to your actions. Work as a team if possible. Recognize your own abilities and limitations. So I'm pretty sure none of us in here are ninjas, SWAT operators. Like, none of us are probably trained fighters in this room. But if that bad guy does make it into that room where you are, and his objective is to kill as many people as possible, take the fight to him. Find what you can do, whatever you have in this room, to slow down, stop, or disrupt him. Take the fight to him so that he stops his attack, maybe backs off, or that you incapacitate him. You absolutely have a right to your life. No one has a right to take that from you. So if someone is trying to attack and kill you, you 100% have a right to defend yourself, and I encourage you to do that. Yeah.
Not saying that like everyone would do this, but if let's like what would you say or around like de-escalation or talking to them, like trying to buy time?
So in the event of an active shooter incident, as we've seen from case studies, in some cases they've spent years planning this. They're way past any kind of de-escalation. If they've already committed the attack and they're in the act of killing people, let's be honest, you're not going to be able to de-escalate or talk about it. They're committed.
In a utopic world, absolutely, but that's not reality.
Yeah, the movie's great.
Do you want to gamble your life with talking with somebody? It's no. If you're at this stage, if you have made it to fight stage, hopefully your instincts have kicked in and you are using anything at your disposal as some type of makeshift weapon, and if not, you know, actually killing the person, but making their life a living hell is basically what you're trying to do.
These steel chairs, the flagpoles that are up, whatever you have to use.
Stapler.
Hit them with a fire
Stapler,
extinguisher,
yeah.
frame with it,
Yeah.
whatever you got.
Whatever you have at your disposal.
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify, this is like after we attempted to run, are hiding, and then like this is like last result. You're in the proximity, you just like fight for your life, right? I just want to clarify that.
Yeah,
Yes,
they come
so-
through that door right there, right
Yeah.
now.
So if
And
you're
then
in this
you-
building
yeah.
and you hear shots being fired, I'm not saying run downstairs and attack him. Like,
No, yeah, no,
don't
run
do
away,
that.
yeah, for sure.
But if you're trying to get away and save your life and you're cornered and you're now confronted and
Yeah.
your options are his life or yours, I hope you take the fight to him because
Cool.
you have a right to life. He's the one that's decided to attack you.
Cool. Okay, just want to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, only you can determine the best course of actions for your specific situation. There is no one-size-fits-all response or action. Be flexible, think outside the box. That's why we're not going to come in here and tell you, hey, you should always do this or you should never do that, because that attacker has, I don't know what his motivation are. I don't know what kind of tools he's bringing to the table or what his plan of attack is or what his goal is. And he's potentially had years and years to kind of plan his attack. So maybe he's going to come in the back door, maybe the front door. There is no set plan that I can give you right now that's going to defeat every single potential attack in this building. You should just have an open-ended thought on this and be flexible in your reaction to whatever the situation is as it unfolds. All right, what to expect from law enforcement. Law enforcement is not going to wait for SWAT or any kind of tactical teams. We train all of our patrol guys that when that call comes in, pretty much everyone with a badge and a gun is going to be coming 100 miles an hour to the scene, and they're going to screech to a stop and run in the front door. So that's what we train our guys. So you're going to have pretty much everyone in any kind of random uniform, detectives from Santa Rosa PD around the corner to patrol guys from the freeway to anyone else is going to be coming in that building responding to this. Our objective is we know that this active attacker is trying to kill as many people as possible, and we know he doesn't have a whole lot of time, so we're trying to make that amount of time he has as small as possible by getting there as quickly as possible. The responding officers, their sole objective is to move quickly and stop the threat. Officers may be wearing tactical vests, ballistic helmets, or they may just be plainclothes officers, kind of like you see this guy here in a t-shirt and jeans. Officers will not stop to render aid to victims until the threat has ended. So if we run into the building and there's injured people on the ground, we're training our guys, you're gonna run past all those injured people and keep on going, because if that shooter is still hurting and killing people, it doesn't do us any good to put tourniquets or treat injuries here, because he's just making more casualties in the back of the building. So our first job is to stop that threat. We're gonna go right to that and bypass all the victims. Follow-on officers and teams, their job is to work on finding, contacting, and extracting any kind of victims. So how to react to the law enforcement. Remain calm, follow instructions, keep hands visible and free of any items, move towards law enforcement personnel when it's safe to do so. Expect to be checked for weapons. We don't know who the shooter looks like. In the real world outside of Hollywood, bad guys don't have bad teeth and wear a sign that says I'm the bad guy, so we don't know. It could be anybody. So follow commands. Ideally, we're gonna ask you questions like, hey, what did you see? How many shots? How many victims? Did you see the shooter? What time frame? Stuff like that. We might check you for weapons, but our goal is to find the bad guy, stop the shooter, and make sure that you stay safe. We may ID and question you. Don't leave until law enforcement officers have instructed you to do so. I'm gonna put a caveat on that. Your safety is number one. So if you need to leave to be safe, then leave. But once this turns into a crime scene, we're gonna need to talk to people and victims and get witness statements, so it's gonna turn into a major incident. But safety is number one priority, so don't hang out in a dangerous area so you can give a statement. Like, that's the wrong answer. For the employees, make sure you have accountability on all your people, because we wanna make sure that everyone is accounted for, that nobody is missing. If you know vital information, suspect description, location, direction, provide that as soon as possible. Call 911 directly. Hey, dispatch, I know who the shooter is. It's gonna be Joe Smith or whatever it is. In many cases, it might be an employee or a former employee or a customer or somebody that you've had an interaction with before. So if you know who it is, that's huge. So call 911, get that to our dispatch, our command post, so we can start working that and get that information relayed countywide and beyond, so we can find the suspect. So any info you have, please make sure that gets relayed. We have
One thing to add to that. So when you guys are exiting, and it's gonna be, everybody's gonna be freaked out, everybody's gonna be running for the exits. For some reason, when these things happen, more often than not, everybody has the phone in their hand. We are running in. You have to understand that the officer coming in doesn't deal with this every day. We're not trained SWAT. We're not, over in Afghanistan, doing this stuff all the time. We're freaking out as well. And we're running towards the bullets. We're not running away like everybody else is. So we don't know if the shooter is in the crowd of people that's coming out, because that's happened as well before. So when you come running out and you have this in your hand, people have been shot, because in a high stress situation, this could look like a gun. So, like this, come out, your hands are up, because we need to be able to see your hands. We need to be able to see what's going on and stuff like that, okay? So just keep that in the back of your mind. Leave everything. If you have to take your phone, put it somewhere where we can't see it, and just hands coming out, okay?
So one issue, yeah.
Let's say
All of them.
Everyone in Sonoma County.
All of them.
If you had Sebastopol PD booking somebody at the jail, they're coming here.
Okay.
Petaluma, Runner Park.
I wouldn't be surprised if Cloverdale PD starts responding. Like,
Yeah.
it's
It's
not
literally
just-
everyone's coming.
It's not just gonna be highway patrol going, oh,
No,
this is ours, so.
I know it's not.
You've got the federal
not
building right here next
guys,
door.
But like at least minimal Santa Rosa PD, maybe the sheriff's department,
Yeah.
and you guys.
Well, and you've got the federal
Plus
building right
fire
here next door.
department.
And you've got Homeland
Ambulance.
Security officers in there too. You may see uniformed Homeland Security that patrol that building coming directly over here as well.
For example, for Uvalde, I think a total of 376 officers responded to that. Now, there's a lot of things that went wrong with that, so that's a whole different case study in and of itself. But here in Sonoma County, if there was a legitimate active shooter victims down call, you're gonna, without a doubt, have hundreds of cops here as quickly as they can get here. So that would absolutely happen.
And the training that Officer Gilbert has put on for the county and it sounds like this is gonna be that moving forward. It's getting all of the agencies together because we all kind of speak a little bit of a different language from the different agencies, but we're getting together and then with fire, because that's a completely different language, and getting us to work together and kind of iron out kinks before something actually happens. So we're getting a lot better trained.
Which segues actually nicely into my next slide here.
Yes.
So the issue that we've run into is, okay, so we can't wait for SWAT to go into a hot scene because there's a bad guy that's hurting people. So we have to run in there. Well, now the issue is we're running down the bad guy to stop him from hurting more people, and we're bypassing people that are bleeding and dying from their injuries, but we know the medics cannot go into that danger area without escort. They don't have ballistic armor, they don't have the training. That's not something that our medics are gonna go into. So in the time it takes law enforcement to go find corner and stop the bad guy, we have victims that are waiting for treatment, which in a big campus, imagine if this was at Santa Rosa JC or Sonoma State, it could potentially be hours before that's clear enough that paramedics can go in. Those victims may not survive that long. So we have kind of developed this new thing called a rescue task force, where we are integrating fire and law enforcement. So the way this is supposed to work is first cops on scene, we're just going straight to the bullets, we're finding the bad guy and we're stopping him. Additional officers on scene, they're gonna find some firefighters, and you might have a handful of firefighters, a handful of cops. Now they're gonna go into those areas, and their job is to go find those victims so we can put some tourniquets on them, triage them, and get them to the ambulances and get them to the hospital as soon as possible before the whole area gets cleaned. So we're recognizing that those patients may not survive if they don't get treatment, and the medics can't, and the firefighters can't just go right in there, but we need to get them care as quickly as possible, so that's what this is trying to do. And Chief could probably talk a little bit about this on the fire side, but here in Sonoma County, we're starting to equip some of our rigs with ballistic armor and helmets, kind of like you can see here in these pictures, so that those firefighters do have some protection when they go in with law enforcement. Law enforcement gives that security, fire gives that medical expertise, and then we get those patients out.
Yeah.
You want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just a couple things as I'm looking at this. So, there are agencies in Sonoma County that do not have the ballistic helmet and vests. Most of the agencies now have medical equipment bags, and so without that, they were just coming in with that big giant EMS bag. To Officer Gilbert's point, like we have now caches of equipment that we carry just for these types of scenes, so we can get in there quickly and address the life-threatening stuff that we're dealing with. And then when we get them into the ambulance to the hospital, we start doing the more in-depth stuff. But we're trying to basically stop the dying. That's our goal. To your point about negotiating or trying to de-escalate, in my opinion, there's a fallacy about yellow coats. So firefighters have been taught that if I wear my yellow brush jacket, like you see for our wildland type fires, that the bad guy might not shoot me because, oh, he's a good guy. Well, this good guy, or the shooter that might think that way has just shot children or everybody else. There's no way he's not going to shoot me, right? So, but anyhow, this is the concern. We are not tactically trained. We default to our experts for that, and they provide us that protection so we can get that medical taken care of immediately or as quickly as possible.
Yep. Perfect. I saw a hand. A question? Yeah, go ahead.
So, from my understanding, Runner Park has their dual firefighter cop training. Could they in theory, like if maybe all departments, not saying all would get trained like that, but in Runner Park, if they were to come onto the scene, could they themselves go alone because they have both of those trainings?
Well, it's a little bit different, as in our first responsibility at an active shooter is we got to stop the threat. It doesn't matter how many victims and how bad their injuries are. If that guy is still up and shooting, we're just making more victims. So we have to go in there and we have to stop him, number one. All of our law enforcement have tactical first aid. In fact, Chief Bray, for all of our guys, they just did a fantastic training on us for tactical, we call it tactical first aid. So all of our guys can go in there and stop bleeding, do tourniquets, and do pressure bandages. But for us, we're trained, that's kind of a secondary role. Once that bad guy has been cornered or stopped, or somebody else is addressing the bad guy, then I, as the officer, recognize that, cool, there's not active victims being created, so there's no one else actively getting shot. Now I can start doing first aid with these guys, get on the radio and call those guys, hey, come to me right now so we can treat these patients. So that's what we're trying to do to bridge that gap between law and fire, is fire is coming into the tactical law enforcement side, and law enforcement is starting to go into more the medical side, so we kind of blend in the middle to minimize that downtime so we can get help to people that need it.
And one other thing about Runner Park Fire, a lot of times, even though they are cross-sworn and cross-trained as police officers, when they're on their fire side of it, they don't have their vests.
Right.
They don't have their guns.
They do.
Some do,
Yeah.
some don't. It just depends. It's not mandatory for them to carry their firearm when they're doing their fire time service. So yes, even though they're cross-sworn, they might not have any of the gear on that we carry every single day, or that their police side carries every single day.
And they're also an anomaly.
Yeah.
They're very, very rare when you have officer firefighter like that in a community. They're firemen, they're supposed to, not always, but they have a box that the other fire departments don't have that has their gun belts in. But that is just that, if they go in, yes, they're cross-trained, they have a higher level of training than we do, higher level of training than he does, just as a cross, but that's not gonna be the norm at all.
And to piggyback on that is that, law's going in to do their, to neutralize the threat. And so if that fire asset, in Runner Park's case, the example that you gave me was, they're going in to do that, and they may not have that medical equipment cache that I was referring to that we all have. And so, so that's one of the issues too, like, are you either law enforcement or are you medical? We're blending that divide, and law carries a lot of equipment now, but it's not to the level or capacity that we're coming in with those, in this case, the folks in the red vests.
Yeah, question over there.
Cool, to segue a little bit more, or like maybe to kind of like conceptualize a bit more like what the future holds for like future trainings, because I know RTF is a really good concept. Is there any possibility that maybe we'll get like supplemental training with like maybe Stop the Bleed or any other kind of like trainings like that that's part of this program possibly?
I think that's a great comment, and actually I was going to get into that a little bit later into this. So yeah, I'll address that in a little bit here, but that is a perfect segue for this conversation. Employer preparation and training. So as an employer, as a business here, you guys make sure to develop your own emergency action plan. I don't know your building or what kind of threats you might or may not have, or where your secure areas are. So you as employees and managers, make sure that you have an emergency action plan or a lockdown plan. Supervisors should have ongoing discussions and exercises with employees. Post your evacuation routes throughout your building. Hey, we're here. Invite law enforcement to your facility to train and familiarize themselves. So kind of to segue on that, we just did active shooter training at the Green Music Center at Sonoma State, and then St. Eugene's K-8 school over here in Santa Rosa, which was fantastic. We just had 105 cops trained in that building. So guess what? If there's ever a real emergency there, we now have 105 local cops that know exactly the layouts of those buildings. So that helps us because we have the training, and helps the businesses because now we have all these cops that know exactly where to go and where things are. So that's a great thing too. Bottom line, ask the hard questions now, because when this happens, it's far too late. Is the facility and the campus secure from trespassers? Now, some of these questions are more phrased for a school, so they may not be applicable here for this building. What happens when staff doesn't recognize a stranger on campus? Is anyone watching for strangers or suspicious items or behavior? What physical security measures have been implemented to prevent attackers from walking or driving up to the school buildings? What is the threshold to call 911? Who makes that call? A lot of times we'll see someone see something suspicious, but they're kind of on the threshold. It's like, I don't know, should I call that in? I don't want to waste dispatcher's time. And so a lot of people see something weird and nobody calls it in because no one doesn't want to be the one that calls it in. So if you see something, say something. Our dispatchers are really good kind of weeding through a lot of the chatter to find, hey, oh, that's an important bit of information. We need to know that. Let me put that out.
And don't think you're wasting time, because our dispatchers get calls of dead raccoons on the freeway. So people will call 911 to report a dead raccoon on the side of the freeway.
Or call just to talk.
Some will call just to have a conversation.
Now, we have some people that call our dispatch center 45,000 times a month.
Yes.
That's a problem. Don't do that. But if you legitimately see something that concerns you, call it in, let our dispatchers and these guys kind of figure out, okay, there's an explanation or we'll address it. What is the means of communication between staff, teachers, and reception? We'll apply that here. Who makes a decision to place a school or the building in lockdown? Are staff informed? What's the lockdown procedure? What rooms on campus are secure? Are there ground level windows an attacker could use to scan rooms or to access the building itself? What is the action plan should an incident occur during recess? How is accountability of students and staff maintained? Are rooms and buildings well marked so locations can be quickly relayed to emergency dispatchers? That's a good note. At our training at one of the schools, none of the classrooms were marked, so it made it hard in our training exercises. Hey, we have victims in a room, but it's really hard for the officers to then notify the command post where they were in the building. So I think all the rooms here are marked, which is perfect. So if we come in, hey, room 1015 or whatever it is, that's a good location that I can relay up to make it a lot easier for us to know where we're going and where victims are. Our staff first aid trained, our first aid kits available in stock. So basic first aid should be something that everyone should in general know. Basic, we call it tactical first aid, stopping the bleeding. It's not a hard concept. I would, just in your everyday life, I would highly recommend everyone to take the time, take maybe a 4-hour class or whatever you need to learn some very basics when it comes to first aid. Because the reality is, if there was an active shooter in this building, no matter how hard we try and how much we train, there is going to be a lag time until we get professional medical care in there. If you have a major arterial bleed, someone could be unconscious in as little as 30 seconds to a minute, and they could be dead within about 2 minutes. There's no way that law enforcement or fire is going to be in there quick enough to save that life. If that's your coworker that has that kind of bleed, you're going to be sitting there for 2 minutes watching them die and not being able to do anything about it. Or take a little class, learn some very basics on what you need to do, and you could literally save their life in that moment. Right now, without any kind of medical equipment, I could put a tourniquet on, put a pressure bandage on, stop any kind of major bleeding if someone had a gunshot or penetrating injury. None of that kind of traumatic first aid is difficult. Just learn the basics. I would highly encourage that. Maybe as the building here in your training days or however you run things, that could be something that could be incorporated. Having first aid kits in the building and having them in a standardized location, maybe each floor has a first aid kit, would be a good idea. So maybe if there was an emergency, you know, hey, I can get a first aid kit and I know there's tourniquets in it or I know there's pressure bandage in it. That would be a good plan that you might have that could potentially save a life. Once we get on scene, your first officers, we generally carry tourniquets, but your first officers might only have 1 or 2. When these guys get on scene, they generally carry a bag that has a whole bunch, but by then we're 15, maybe even 20, 30 minutes into the incident. So anyone with a major bleed, they wouldn't have survived that long. It's gonna be whoever's in that room with that victim. If they applied first aid, they saved a life. If they just waited, then the person died. That's kind of where we're at with that. Anything to add on the medical stuff?
No, not really. I was just going to point to one thing, that top bullet point. One, it's less frequent now, but the smoke breaks. What do people often do if they're going to go vape or smoke or do something when they walk outside?
Leaving the door open with like a door socket.
They chop the door, right? And so those little things, right? It's like a thief that finds a bike that's unsecured in its lamppost. It's convenient. And so some of those things that we can do to harden our workspace is things that, you know, that could help in the event of something like this to play out. You know, I ask here, we, as employers and employees are often like, well, like I'd ask, do we know how many staff are in the building today? Like, oh, we have a roster total, but how many people are here today? And from an employee's perspective, we're like, well, are they doing this because they want to see if I'm clocking in late, clocking out late, or doing that sort of stuff? On the other side, on the employer side, one of the things we're going to know, who's here? Is it just us, or is there still another 100 people in the building? And actually, I have no clue. I have no idea, right? But those are some of those things that can help in that incident or emergency action plan that kind of put this together.
And you say something interesting, because I was the second investigator chair on the Yountville Veterans Home shooting when the staff sergeant killed the 3 psychologists and then killed himself up in Yountville, and I had to deal with that case and all that. And bring up a perfect point. There was one door that people would constantly go out in and out of the basement. He left that, they left that door with a little stopper there. It should have been a key card entry. It wasn't, but people would go out that door for their breaks, for their lunch, and instead of just taking their key card out and scanning back in, they would leave the door stopper there. That's exactly how our shooter, Albert Wong, was able to get in and access a pathway home before he murdered those 3 women, tried to murder the sheriff's deputy that responded, and then shot himself in the head. So yes, securing the doors when you leave, yeah, it's big.
And not to beat a dead horse, but the same is true of Uvalde. Uvalde, the school had a great physical security there. All the exterior doors had a keypad, except they would prop them up with rocks, which is how he got in. And the classroom that he shot up, all the doors that were there were steel reinforced commercial doors, and they all locked from the inside, except that classroom, the lock was broken, and the school district knew it was broken, and they decided, we don't want to disrupt class, we'll wait till summer break to fix it. So the teacher in that classroom had no way to secure that door, and because they propped open the exterior door, he had full access to the building. So again, like I said earlier, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And you had your hand up, go ahead.
Yeah, and to that point of exterior doors and access into the building, the only one door that's open and accessible is that front level door. There's security, we're constantly,
Good.
there's the custodian security, departments are constantly on our regular routines throughout the day, checking and physically checking those other doors that are usually locked.
Good,
throughout the
excellent.
day. And any door that we find that's unlocked, not blocked open, but inadvertently unlocked,
Yeah.
left unlocked and unattended, that gets noted, logged, and followed through as much as possible to find out who did that, who forgot to relock it, and so forth. It's a big deal. We've got many points of entry that are constantly checked to make sure they are closed and locked. And there's no door that's propped and left open that's secured out of convenience for someone. We have keys. It's not an issue to use that key for anybody with that key access to use that method to go in and out of the lock.
And I will say, that being the case, you guys as a building are head and shoulders above a lot of businesses and schools out there. And in my experience with this building over the years is, yeah, generally you guys are a lot more safety conscious and security conscious than a lot of places. I've done site assessments at schools, and there's a tremendous amount of complacency in other businesses because, hey, it'll never happen here. I don't need to worry about that. And we prop open the door, and it's never a problem until it is a problem. And unfortunately, when this is the problem, it's catastrophic. Take us on.
And the same goes for deliveries and methods of getting freight and deliveries in and out of the building. There's a process and there's a strict method and process by which, if it's a large enough delivery, there's to go through the loading dock. There's a process through that freight elevator, that rear elevator, and this is the path and this is the method that they are to follow.
Good.
And these projects and these deliveries will go in that method. They're to have drivers follow these methods that are standard for this building. So they're following an expected path and they're following expected behaviors going in and out of these doors and these access points. So they're not doing anything out of the ordinary that we would ordinarily expect. And anything that is, that's when myself as the chief would come in and stop and say, okay, who is this and what's going on here? What's being behaved?
Excellent.
We do, and that's where I want to let the employees and the lieutenants and Phil know here that are in the room that we do follow up and we keep up on that. There are people watching in that sense. We are watching. So.
I'm glad to hear that. That's excellent, and that's going to prevent a lot of those weak links, which is where the shooter gets in. You get a question over here?
Yeah, so I guess to like ask
Yeah.
the hard question now, I know like I think we experienced in our office specifically, like 2 events specifically. One event maybe 2 and a half weeks ago where a gentleman came up with a backpack, kind of like bypass a sign in with security. And like overall it wasn't like a bad situation at the end, but initially because of like the interaction, how we interacted with CHP, the individual's a tyrant figure. There was a moment where like me and my coworkers, because we're like, we have like, you know, the security door and all that fun stuff. There was a moment where I questioned kind of like, hey, I really don't know like what the hardened security measures of our security building, like is this like, for example, the window that we have for our front clerk area or PID is at level 2, level 3. In the case of gentleman pulled out something from his backpack, are we gonna, you know, be able to, you know, feel safe from gunfire or anything of that nature? Because I know we have our like locked door and that felt pretty secure, but there was a split second I was like, oh, we have no real like understanding of the level ratings of our like windows and all that fun stuff for like, you know, bullet resistance and whatnot. So I was wondering, like, would that be something that we would ask you, the
Well,
building?
we would start with,
Okay.
with the respective department
Okay.
and tenant space of where you're at, and then
Okay.
start with the management in that
That's
space
great.
of that particular department. Cause usually in, the construction of those spaces, that's like a
Mhm.
tenant improvement, so they
Okay.
would have installed, the tenant would have installed that.
Okay.
So like in your case, it would have been the DIR.
Sure.
That would have installed that equipment, so right away, there's a few people within that, Daniel, for one, I go right to him and say, okay, what do we know about this? We most likely, we don't always, but the intended improvements, we most likely have that information, possibly there's some engineering that we can find out, and that is a great point.
Mhm.
Because we can know that, and we should know that, about the level of, security that this, apparent bulletproof type glass provides in
Mhm.
these spaces, so I will follow through with that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Get through here. All right, individual preparation and training. Make sure as individuals we're participating in training, pre-plan, so during an emergency you have a plan. So if you're on the 4th floor, have in your mind, hey, if something was to happen, what path am I taking? Elevator, stairs, how am I getting out of here, or am I just locking down? Know your workspace and what your evacuation and barricade options are. Identify your facility weakness and come up with options to reduce that risk. Have a pre-planned Alamo. Considering everyone died at Alamo, maybe that's not the best term, but in the military, when we say Alamo, the Alamo is a hardened building where we can kind of go to as our place of last resort. We can go in there, lock the doors, and kind of hunker down. So that's what I mean by the Alamo.
Okay.
Stop laughing. Okay. An attacker is looking for an easy target, so your job is to make it a hard target, so it's just not worth the effort, and he moves on. Know what is in your workspace that you could use as a weapon. Be realistic. Okay, statistically speaking, an active shooter incident is never going to happen in this building. Almost never going to happen in this building. It is a possibility, so we should not tell ourselves that it will never happen, because it could possibly happen. But statistically, it's very unlikely. So I don't want people to be freaking out that, hey, he could walk in tomorrow and we're all gonna die, because that's just not realistic. But in your mind, you should be thinking that it might happen someday, and if it was to happen, how am I gonna react? What is my plan of attack? But don't be paranoid that it's imminent, because that's not realistic. Winning the fight. The incident doesn't end on scene. Know the resources available to you. Critical incident debrief with local law enforcement and government agencies is encouraged. So for us on the law and fire side, anytime we're involved in a critical incident, a serious incident like this, we have peer support and counseling options, and we have an incident debrief where basically we kind of talk through it, because there is a tremendous amount of psychological trauma that comes with an incident like this. So heaven forbid you're ever involved in something on this scale. Make sure that you're taken care of, not just physically, but emotionally as well. So take advantage of those kinds of resources. And that kind of wraps up my presentation. I wanted to open the floor to kind of to any questions you might have for any of us here or, about this or anything else. So please feel free to ask away. Yeah.
Who do we reach out to in our building side or our department side to like maybe coordinate some sort of like supplemental training, like stop the bleed or like, those type of things? Would we just escalate with our management to coordinate with you guys, or who's the point of contact for that?
Do you have any connections for like the kind of workplace first aid training or anything like that?
Sort of. And
Okay.
so, yes and no.
Okay.
Is the right way to say it. So, my previous life, I was down in Las Vegas. Stop the Bleed campaign is a national campaign that is funded. It is tourniquets and teaching that. And tournniquets, like, we got AEDs and cabinets and different places around, right? In case somebody has a heart attack. literally putting tourniquets and such inside those cabinets.
Mm.
There's a cost associated with that. And so it's a national program that's put out there called Stop the Bleed. I reached out to our county DEM here and asked him, what do we got? He's been trying to get that going. It always comes down to a funding thing.
Yeah.
And so it would be jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So seeing how this is in the city of Santa Rosa, I would defer to reach out to them. Being a state building, maybe it goes that route, gets a little convoluted, confusing. Long story short is that you can absolutely acquire equipment as an organization or individually and have that there. We do teach that. We are an option to do that, to teach it a Stop the Bleed like training. Because that again, that's an acronym or an actual trademark thing, Stop the Bleed.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there is avenues for people to teach that. So if you reached out to Santa Rosa and are like, you know what, I don't really have a guy, I have guys that can teach that, but why don't you contact the Asher group, which is collectively us, we can coordinate and pull something like that. It's important that I'm passionate about it. It's important that everybody's trained up on how to do that. Even if done inappropriately, if it stalls and buys us time, because that's what we're looking to do, is buy time, right? What Officer Gilbert was referring to is that this incident can happen, and it may be 10 minutes, 15 minutes before fire and EMS gets in scene. If we can buy time for the individuals that are there, like you are taking care of yourselves or your coworkers, buying us time, that's how we get to having the max survivability. And so, very convoluted, long story. There's ways to go about it, but not a true Stop the Bleed campaign yet. I ain't working on it, but it probably was gonna be a little while before the actual true program comes out. So deal.
Cool.
This is also something that anybody can do on their own. You can seek out private, first aid but any of the type of stuff where it's a tourniquet, it's a halo dressing, it's any of the bandaging, wound packing, anything like that, doesn't have to be confined just to active shooter, active attacker. It can apply in your personal life too. Child falls down and breaks their arm. Somebody impales themselves on something. It doesn't have to be, a violent attack. This applies to all kinds of stuff that can just be helpful in your normal life.
Yeah, when I go out on my boat, I see every year that people, get props and get leg cuts or foot cut off. And on my boat, I have tourniquets on there just in case, because you just never know. But I will say this, if it's something that, because obviously people go to YouTube for everything now. If you're gonna do something like that and look at that stuff and you end up getting a tourniquet, make sure you know how to use it, because when it goes on the right way, the person that you have to put that on, or if you put it on yourself, you are going to be fighting yourself. It is extremely painful when a tourniquet is applied properly.
Yeah, your guy showed us that.
It's Stop the Bleed's great, because these incidents that we're referring to today are, they're extraordinary, right? The likelihood of this occurring is low. Doesn't mean it can't, right? But the day-to-day life is where we're probably going to get more exposed to something like that. So yesterday I had to call a 4-year-old who tripped and fell, put her arm through the entertainment console, and she had a huge laceration across her arm. The parents are calling, blood's dripping through everything. I get there, am I dropping a tourniquet? And I was able to assess, but you know what, the tourniquet wasn't necessary on that one. Whereas there was a recent incident where there was an officer, and I don't want to, if you want to tell the story or I can tell the story, it doesn't matter. But
One of our officers just graduated the academy 4 months ago, so brand new, just went through the tactical first aid training with Dave here. And he was off duty driving on view to motorcycle that got hit broadside. The guy's leg was basically amputated. So he jumped out off duty, was able to put that tourniquet on very quickly and literally saved the motorcycle rider's life just because he was in the right place and had that medical equipment. So that's the kind of thing on a day-to-day basis where this medical training will pay off. In this emergency, absolutely it'll pay off. But statistically, it's going to be that day-to-day incident like that you just happen to be there and have that training that you can make a difference.
Cutting open a box, right? Make yourself, things like that. Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
It might be more on the first aid side of things, but let's say there was someone injured just outside your office building, would it be better to leave them there because you risk hurting them more, or if you were able to
depends on the scope of injuries and the context. If we're talking about, like, let's say there's an active shooter incident and you have someone out there that's fully exposed, then yeah, I would grab them and pull them here where they're not being exposed, where they could get, maybe the shooter could shoot them from elsewhere in the building. But if we're talking about someone just collapsed on the sidewalk in front of the building because they had a heart attack, there's no exterior threat in that context, so there wouldn't be any kind of reason to move them. If we're talking about they fell off a ladder or it's a vehicle accident, well, now I don't want to move them, because if they have internal injuries, right, maybe I could cause some issues moving them in that case. I just want to stabilize them in that context. So it all depends on what the injury is we're talking about.
Can you explain what a tourniquet is? Because most people don't.
Sure. Tourniquet, I have one right here, is this right here. All it is a strap that's going to go around his arm here. I'm going to pull this tight. And as
You're right.
it's Velcro, kind of self-adhesive, and this windlass here, I'm going to crank this really tight. Now, all it is really a belt that squeezes it. It's kind of like pinching a garden hose. It's going to squeeze his arm. So if he had a major bleed on his arm here and he's spraying blood everywhere, I'm just going to slide this up, put the Velcro on, twist, 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 and then secure this, and that's going to pinch off that garden hose so that blood stops coming out. Really easy to apply. It's not rocket science, and this absolutely saves lives. And if you have any kind of major bleeding or even significant bleeding on arms or legs, we're throwing this on. Cops love this because this is super simple. I don't have to think about it. I just throw it on.
And to add to that, when I first learned EMS, they were all about not using tourniquets. That was like the story for like 30 years. Don't use tourniquets. They've learned that thing can stay on for 2 hours. It's not going to hurt anybody. If it goes on somebody, and it turns out like my 4-year-old yesterday, if I would have dropped a tourniquet on her, it wouldn't have hurt her. It just so happens that it wasn't this squirting blood scenario, right? We were able to hold it. So if I drop the tourniquet on there, or you drop the tourniquet on somebody, and we get there and we're like, that's going to stay on, they're going to go to the hospital, and the hospital can determine whether or not it needs to stay there or not stay there. You're not going to hurt them. It's uncomfortable, don't get me wrong, right? But as far as like, you're not going to kill them by putting the tourniquet on, as long as it's not around the neck. Put it around the neck, you probably
I'll get to you in just a second. And one more thing, so let's say you're in this room and you guys probably don't carry one of these like I do, but you have a major bleed. What am I going to do? Well, I'm not going to watch them bleed to death. I can tear a t-shirt into strips, wrap that around, put a stick or a pen through there, maybe some sticker and a pen, but stick something through there, and I can achieve more or less the same thing, maybe not be quite as effective as a purpose-built device such as this, but it will do the same job. So think outside the box, see what you can do you're just squeezing that arm or leg down to stop that blood, and you can do that different ways. This is a great tool, but you can improvise.
To segue, because you mentioned like that'll be tourniquets, if you're familiar, are really good for like limb type injuries. Sucking chest wounds, seals, is that something that's also to recommend to have in the office in the event of active shooters, like chest seals,
I would, so for us on the law side, that's part of our training, and we carry the chest seals in our first aid kit, so we will apply them. You want to touch on that? It's more of your field.
Well, actually, I got one question. What's your background?
I grew up in Richmond. We had in high school South of Beat programs, really under-resourced, underfunded area. A lot of like firearm violence. So in high school, I got exposed to like at some point, if you were in any leadership role in school, you had South of Beat training. Like I remember being like 15, 16, like learning these things.
Yeah.
And then apart from like active shooter situations.
Okay, all right. Chest seals is a term that I was kind of shocked to hear civilian use. All it is that I got a hole in my chest, and it's making it very hard for me to breathe, because every time I breathe, I'm sucking in air, which is shrinking my lung, right? To where now I can't breathe as well as I want to. We take a big sticker, right? Not a smiley face, it's a chest seal, but it's a big sticker, and I stick it to that hole to prevent the air from getting pulled into on the sucking chest wound side. Depending upon how you're trained, it would be absolutely something that you could do. We have folks that are EMTs, that are emergency medical responders, that are what we refer to as Title 22 trained, basic first aid trained. They carry kits in their own vehicles that are their own equipment. And I would say yes, that's something that's viable. Us professionally are bound by protocols by our overseeing body when it comes to medicine. Like I have certain, though I may know how to do certain medical things, if my LEMSA or overseeing medical body says I can't practice that because it's not within my quote unquote scope, then I'm technically not allowed to do that. And so I have to be careful about saying, yeah, you can do that sort of thing. Like, yeah, you could drop a chest dart, Like, well, if you don't know how to do it, then I would defer away from that. But if you are trained and received the training on how to use those sorts of things, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to save lives. Literally stop the dying is what we're trying to do.
Just a question about like using our building as an example. So if my office is on the 3rd floor, there's a threat on the 1st floor. What are some things to think about, like to consider? So again, there's someone on the 1st floor, I'm on the 3rd floor. How do I decide if I'm gonna stay inside or if I'm gonna run?
You know the building better than me, but based on what I know on it, it would be very difficult for you to kind of sneak out and flee the building if you have an active threat going on the 1st floor. So in your case, running may not be an option, so hiding might be your only option at that point. So I would, in your office, maybe figure out how you can secure your door, make it your Alamo, roll the windows down, turn off the lights, call dispatch, say, hey, I'm barricaded in room number whatever, I have 4 people with me, and then, oh, I hear gunshots, okay, keep dispatch updated with what you can hear and what you know in that moment, and dispatch will stay on the line, and then dispatch will then update officers responding with, okay, the shooter's now in the north part of the building, or hey, we have 3 down, or whatever it is. So in that case, if running's not an option, now you default to, I have to hide.
I'd love to add, though, this raises a good point. Our north and south stairwells, like if there was an issue, you run right out this door, straight down this hall into the stairwell. That stairwell gets you down to the 1st floor without having to go into the lobby. So, in the event that there is something in the lobby and you're on any floor of the building, head for the north and south stairs quietly, don't smash the door, the panic harbor, don't make any sound. Go down the stairs quietly, exit the building, you won't have to go into the lobby. Okay, so that does bring a good point. So there's some other things.
And you, in the moment, you're going to have to make that decision what's going to be the safest option for you, because in theory, your shooter is also going to be moving around, so potentially he could have also gone on the stairwell, but if you know for a fact, I can see him, he's in the north of the building, maybe I can jump down a level and escape on the south, that might be a safer option for you. But if you know he's downstairs somewhere, but you don't know, maybe you're going to make the decision, I'm just going to lock down my office and call 911 and wait here. You're going to have to make a decision based on what you know, and that's the way that is.
And also can be multiple.
What's that?
There also can be multiple shooters.
But potentially. Generally speaking, that's not common, but yeah, absolutely, there could be.
And then there's only like 4 exits
Yeah.
out of the building. The 2 stairwells, the main entrance, and the back top.
Right.
And, if you're at the south elevator, you could escape through the back dock without anybody knowing.
So one thing about firefighters is every time we walk into a building, we're looking at fire stuff. Sprinklers, extinguishers, doors, things like that. And I imagine Lob looks at things a little bit different, but they're doing the same thing. They're sizing up the people in the crowd, right? Their exits, their exposure points. We kind of are trained in a certain way. I bring that up because civilians, by and large, when they walk into a business, a building, a theater, what door do you think they walk out of?
Same when they came in.
The exact same door that they came in. And so there's emergency exits for reasons, right? And so what we find, and even in just a normal emergency, people are still gonna go out the door that they came in. And so the thing that I would stress is know I think it was you that said there's 4 access points. Know the proximity of those egress, the places, the exits, and how quickly you can get to one. Know where you're at in your surroundings. And by doing that, that increases the likelihood that you can escape quicker versus going back out the same way that you came in, which is most likely the same way that individual is coming as well, right? So know your building, know your surroundings.
To add on to that, what you can do individually is go through scenarios in your head. Just what if a person comes in the front door? What am I gonna do? What if the person is on the 2nd floor? What am I gonna do? There's no right or wrong answer in it, but chance favors a prepared mind. Rather than never thinking about it until the low boy moment, you've got at least something going on, whether it's right, wrong, indifferent. Any plan is better than no plan. And that's, we do that all the time. When we pull over a car, what if the driver gets out? What if the passenger gets out? What if we walk up and they have a gun? What if? So when that what if happens, we're not completely back on our heels. We have a little bit of a plan going ahead. Fire does the same thing. I was a plumber for 20 years before this life. When I walked in, I was looking at fire sprinklers and faucets and is what I did. But now when I walk in, it's like, okay, there's a shooter up on the 3rd floor. Where would I be hiding? Where would I do that? That goes through my head every time I walk into a building.
What that does
It's
is
a
it
little
gives your
disturbing,
brain, it gives your brain a starting point. So like if you
Yeah.
game it in your head or think about, hey, like in this scenario, if this was to happen, how would I react? That if something similar happens, it gives your brain somewhere to start with your reaction. So that's important. And we've all seen this many times in real world emergencies where a relatively benign kind of incident happens. Maybe it's a crash or maybe something semi-dramatic happens, but you're gonna have a party to that that's in total vapor lock shock, can't think, can't speak, because in their mind, they've never once considered something like this might have happened, and it just happened, and they can't function, they can't speak, because they're in total shock for something that's really not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, because they've never considered that, hey, this might actually happen. So in this situation here in your building, think about that. Like, okay, so if I hear shots in the lobby right now, well, how would I react? And that's just starting that thought process. Yeah.
Okay, so there's an active situation and I hide somewhere and within a few minutes I don't hear anything going on. I'm just thinking in terms of, should I delay calling 911? I'm not getting information that would be useful for 911, but I am maybe wanting to tell them where I'm at. Because I'm locked away somewhere and I just don't really know how it's going up there. And so I don't know what's safe to matter.
So what's going to happen in a real-world incident? So let's say there's a legitimate call here and there's victims or shots being fired. As I said, you're going to have hundreds of cops here. So the first cops are going to come in and they're going to rapidly go to wherever that shooter is to address that kind of threat. But more as cops show up on scene, they're going to start flooding the building, and every nook and cranny in this building is going to eventually get searched. So wherever you are, they're going to get to your location eventually. It's important for you to call 911 and let dispatch know, hey, I'm in this room, there's 2 people with me, I don't hear anything. That's good intel that we need to know that, hey, I know on the 3rd floor, we have people hiding in that room, so as I'm coming up onto that means for me, I know the bad guy's not in that room, so that's good info, so I know, I'll know that, and when I'm going into that room, I know, hey, we got friendlies in there, and that means also, if we have a command post set up, cool, I have enough officers. You 3, you're going to this room. There's 2 people in there. You're going to get them out this way in the building. So that way we can coordinate getting you out of the building as well. So in this type of situation, I would say that's critical. Even if you don't have intel on the shooter, that's intel that our dispatch needs to know. So if it's safe for you to call 911, like the shooter's not around the corner, call it, let them know what you know, and they will give you instructions over the phone at that point. Yeah.
It's a good idea, I mean, the window go jump out.
If it depends, if you're on the 1st floor and you can safely get out of that window and run, absolutely. Running is always going to be your safest option. If I'm downstairs, like this window, I'm pretty sure it doesn't open. But if there's a shooting and my life is at risk, I don't care about the window. I'll throw a chair through it and I'll climb out the window. Absolutely, I'd highly recommend that you do that. On this level, I can't fly very well, so I wouldn't be able to go out this window. So if you can safely break your window and get out, absolutely do that.
Okay, Sam, the second floor.
26 miles an hour.
Good to know. That might be hazardous for my health, so I'll avoid that one.
Yeah.
Was there another question?
Oh, which floor? The 3rd floor is that good to jump? Because I don't know if I will hurt my leg.
I followed apparently 26 miles an hour, so I probably wouldn't try anything above the 1st floor. So, yeah.
So I guess essentially, like what I'm understanding so far is our safety is our individual responsibility. We
Yes.
shouldn't depend on our building managers or the response. I mean, not that response doesn't matter, but there is a lag. So
Yes.
realistically, at every point, think about me, and my safety, and that's okay, right?
Oh,
I just wanna
100%.
verbalize that out loud.
That's a fantastic assessment, 100%. We're going to do everything we can to give you protection and get you safety, but in the moment, our responsibility is to stop the threat. We're not going to necessarily stop and to help you. So yes, your safety is your responsibility. Do what you need to do to make sure you stay safe. Yes,
Cool.
Great assessment on that. I've got a split here in just a second, so I got time for a couple more questions.
Just ask, like, how are we supposed to react in the situation where you do have those First Amendment monitors and they have to they're allowed to exercise their right to be here, but at what point does it like cross like, okay, they're not just they're here to do something more
As someone
instead.
handles you.
I just don't know how to react in that situation.
So they're allowed to film here.
Yeah.
They can come in here, they can film all day. They can, I mean, let's be honest, the majority of these offices, there's nobody in the front of them anyway. Let them come in and film. What the one particular individual who was here a few weeks ago when I was here is looking for, he's looking for your reaction. He's looking for you to say something, for any of you to say something that he could say, you're violating my constitutional rights. Because then what he does, and he has a history of doing this throughout the Western United States, he retains an attorney, he gets a quick payout. So let him film. Let him film all he wants. Even if he's sitting there talking through the glass and trying to get your attention, just ignore him. Where he crosses the line is if, say, there's a customer trying to take care of business. And when the customer is working with the employee and he steps in between and he's dissuading that customer from accomplishing their business, then he's beginning to break the law. If he threatens anyone in any matter. Now, when I mean threat, I don't mean, hey, I'm putting you on YouTube. Some people this day and age, they take that as a threat. That's whatever. If you're worried about being on camera, there's cameras everywhere across this place. There's cameras right here. There's cameras as you walk down the street. You're on camera everywhere you go nowadays. So that shouldn't be a threat. If he actually threatens that, hey, if you don't talk to me, you know, I will break through this glass and come after you, I will kick down this door, then he's breaking the law, then he goes to jail. But if he's just walking around filming, hi, what do you guys do here? And you just ignore him, eventually he's gonna get bored and he's gonna go away. So he's looking for the reaction.
One of the ways to think about it, the way that I've explained it before, because I've dealt with this a lot in different state agencies, is that a lot of agencies, DMV was my normal one, was they put up no filming. And they think that that's law, that people can't film. You have what's called an expectation of privacy. In this room right now, with everybody around, there is zero expectation of privacy, okay? One way of thinking of it, it's a little crude, but how much clothes would you shed? If you say nothing, there is no expectation of privacy. If you're in your room at home with the drapes drawn, you have a very high expectation of privacy. You're getting into more of a peeping Tom law, but it still applies as far as videotaping is concerned. So if you're on the street outside, you're anywhere in this building, even the lobbies, they're publicly accessible. So to have somebody come in and it just be filming alone, that's not breaking any type of law. Now, filming coupled with threat, with impeding people of doing their job, not just I'm filming you and now you're so uncomfortable that you can't do your job, that's not breaking the law. That's just your own problem. It is.
That's really what it comes down to.
But it has to be coupled with, you know, you need to come here and help me, and you're in the middle of something, or they're making it so the whole office can't do their job. And we've dealt with people like that, and that's what the section that's outside some of the offices, 602.1B, is there for. So when we come in and we have somebody that is making it impossible for you guys to do your job, that it is now a misdemeanor and we can arrest them, that we can physically take them out of there so you guys can do your job. That's the whole point of it. As far as filming, if you don't, I mean, in this room with the door open, I have a little bit higher expectation of privacy, but not nothing. With the door closed, the door's locked, the shades are drawn, well, now these are open. Okay, I have a higher level of expectation of privacy, but it's not really high yet. Okay, so that's where we have to meter it. And a lot of officers throughout the country have gotten into a lot of trouble because they don't understand this law. Because they think that, you know, well, you're filming our station. You know, you could be getting intel, you could be doing this, you could be doing that. Well, it's visible from the street. You can't stop them from doing that. But then officers will go out, they'll confront these people, and then they end up on YouTube. And then they end up in a lawsuit, and because they violated somebody's First Amendment right. So those get a little tricky sometimes, but in the couple instances we had a couple weeks ago, they weren't particularly, one, we resolved you know, we were able to work the person through it. He had some mental issues, that we were able to deal with and get him through. The other one was just somebody looking for a payout. You got a question in the back?
So what is it when they say you're filming without consent?
What's
Well, one of the young ladies that when the guy came in, he was filming her directly on her, and she was like, well, I don't want you filming me, but I didn't give you consent.
that's a big nothing.
Go behind a different cubicle.
Yep, that's a big nothing.
So-
Do I have to have consent if I'm filming you with my body worn camera?
When you walk in the front doors, you got the globes right there. You're on camera as soon as you get within 10 feet of this building.
Yeah.
So for these folks, it's important to understand is they generally know the law extremely well, and they go right up to the line, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to rile people up and create a scene without them actually doing anything wrong. Because they're trying to create drama because they make money on YouTube on it, and if then they get a reaction from somebody else that does do something illegal, like us arresting them illegally, then they get a huge payout there. This is just a moneymaker. They're just looking for a reaction, and the best way to get rid of them is not give them anything at all, because then they get bored, they're not making any money, they have no footage for YouTube, and they leave, and they know I'm not coming back to that building again. But yeah, like these gentlemen were saying, there's no expectation of privacy. I can't tell someone in public you can't film me. Like, that's just.
So the
way
signs
it is.
that are up outside the some of the offices, they're really cool if people are like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna film, and they just go along with it. But legally, there's nothing we can do to enforce that. That sign is just there as a sign, just as kind of a deterrent.
And these guys are First Amendment auditors. That's what these guys do. They go around to all these different places. And I mean, the guy that was here, Bay Area Transparency, is his YouTube page. Check it out if you want. You just give him more money. But, you know, check it out if you want. But he does. He's been in Idaho. He's been in Nevada. He's been in Arizona. He's been in Oregon. He's been in Washington. He's up and down the state of California. And that's all he does is content create for this sole purpose.
Yes.
You know, the last guy that was here exercising his rights, I exercised my rights back on the camp. So,
And you have your right, so go for it.
I had the right, and what I did, I was genuinely concerned, because he was here for way too long, being way too much of a nuisance. And toward the end of the day, I wanted to get up close and personal with this guy with no confrontation whatsoever, using my curiosity and fascination with his equipment. So I got that close to him with no confrontation.
Right, but now,
And I'm
now you go from that, when he's in the building,
Yeah.
and he's just filming, all he's doing is making you feel uncomfortable.
That's it.
So for you getting up close and getting that close to him, ultimately what, other than taking the bait and getting upset, no, I'm just saying in general.
It's just, I don't advise anybody to do what.
But when people say,
No.
I don't give you my consent to film me,
Yeah.
that's not a thing. Legally, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
I've had people here question me about, well, he's loitering. He's not here for any legitimate business. He's loitering. Loitering, no. There has to, if you read the loitering laws, there has to be some form of other thing that he plans on doing in terms of committing a crime to say it's loitering, which is why you hear the term loitering for the purpose of prostitution. When you see, you know, in different states, people out there walking the streets, you're loitering for the purpose of a crime. Being in here just filming is not technically loitering. Yeah, thanks, Joe.
All right, I think I got to get out of here. So thank you guys for being an attentive audience. Hopefully you got some good information out of this. I did want to say big thanks to Chief Bray for coming out here. I don't usually get fireside for these conversations. So
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
you bet.
This is gonna be